You've been so consumed by your own fear that you never once stopped to ask what the person across from you is afraid of. And that oversight has cost you more than every mistake you've ever made combined. Because here is the truth that most people will never accept: everyone you have ever dealt with is running from something. Your boss is running from irrelevance. Your partner is running from abandonment. Your rival is running from exposure. And you have been so busy managing your own anxiety, so preoccupied with your own discomfort, that you handed away the single most powerful piece of leverage any human being can possess. You walked into every room blind to what was actually happening in it. You reacted to what people said, what people did, what people projected, and you never once looked underneath to see what was driving all of it. That ends now. Read their fear and you own their choices. That is the thesis. Everything else flows from it. Machiavelli understood that power is not about force. It is about seeing what others cannot see in themselves and positioning yourself accordingly. The ruthless art Machiavelli perfected begins with one discipline: the ability to read what someone is afraid of before they know it themselves. And once you see it, you do not need to raise your voice. You do not need to threaten. You simply calibrate, and their fear does the work for you. Here are 7 principles that will rewire how you see every person in your orbit. Number 1. Everyone is running from something, and what they run from controls everything they do. This is the foundation. Without it, the rest means nothing. People are not rational. I need you to internalize that. Not as a slogan, not as something you nod along to, but as a lived understanding that changes how you move through the world. Every decision the people around you make is shaped by an emotional need they probably cannot name. They rationalize after the fact. They construct logical narratives to explain choices that were never logical to begin with. And the engine driving all of it is fear. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that makes someone scream or freeze. The quiet kind. The kind that sits underneath the surface and colors every interaction. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of being left behind. Fear of losing status. Fear of being exposed as a fraud. Fear of being unloved. Fear of death, not the literal kind, but the social kind, the kind where you stop mattering, stop being invited, stop being thought of. These fears are not incidental. They are the operating system. And most people have no idea their own operating system even exists. They think they are making choices based on logic, on principle, on values. They are not. They are making choices based on whatever their particular fear demands of them in that moment. You see this everywhere once you start looking. The colleague who always agrees with the boss, you think he is a pushover, but he is terrified of conflict. The friend who constantly one-ups every story you tell, you think he is arrogant, but he is terrified of being invisible. The family member who criticizes everything you do, you think she is judgmental, but she is terrified that your success will make her own stagnation undeniable. Once you see the fear, the behavior stops being confusing. It becomes predictable. And predictable people are manageable people. This is what strategic people understand that most people do not. Most people get frustrated by other people's behavior. They take it personally. They react. Strategic people observe the same behavior and see a pattern, a map, a fear underneath it all. They do not get angry at the pattern. They study it. They file it away. And when the moment requires it, they use it. The cost of not knowing this is enormous. Every time you have been blindsided by someone's behavior, a sudden betrayal, an unexpected rejection, a confusing shift in loyalty, it was because you were reading their words instead of their fear. You took the surface for the substance. And you paid for it. Number 2. The body never lies, and what it reveals will give you everything you need. People are remarkably good at managing their words. They rehearse. They edit. They choose the phrase that sounds best, the tone that conveys what they want you to believe. But the body does not rehearse. The body responds to threat before the conscious mind even registers that a threat exists. This is limbic system architecture. It is ancient. It is involuntary. And it is the most honest thing about any human being. When someone is afraid, their body does one of 3 things before their mind catches up. It freezes. It prepares to flee. Or it prepares to fight. And you can read all 3 if you know what to look for. The freeze response is the most overlooked one, and it is also the most revealing. When someone feels psychologically threatened, when you have said something that touches too close to their fear, you will see a momentary stillness. A pause that is slightly too long. A micro-expression that flickers across the face and disappears. The eyes narrow or go flat. The shoulders tighten almost imperceptibly. The breathing changes, sometimes it's shallow, sometimes it stops for a beat. That freeze is the body saying, danger. Something just touched the fear. Pay attention to what triggered it, because that is the fear. The flight response is more obvious but often misread. People do not literally run from conversations. They flee psychologically. They change the subject. They deflect with humor. They find a reason to leave the room. They reach for their phone. They become suddenly interested in something across the room. All of these are flight behaviors. And they tell you that whatever was just discussed, whatever topic or word or suggestion prompted the deflection, that is where the fear lives. The fight response is the easiest to spot but the hardest to interpret correctly. When someone reacts with sudden aggression, with disproportionate intensity, with a sharpness that seems uncalled for, that is not anger. That is fear wearing anger as a mask. The person who gets hostile when you ask a simple question is not angry about the question. They are afraid of what the question might uncover. The person who attacks your character when you offer mild criticism is not defending their position. They are defending their self-image, because their self-image is the wall they have built between themselves and their fear. Once you develop the ability to read these signals, something shifts in you permanently. You stop hearing what people say and start seeing what they are. Conversations become transparent. Meetings become readable. Arguments become almost boring, because you can see the architecture of the other person's fear playing out in real time. And here is the critical part. You do not need them to tell you what they are afraid of. In fact, they cannot. Most people do not know. They have spent their entire lives building elaborate structures to avoid confronting their own fear. They have careers built on running from it. They have relationships structured around it. They have identities constructed to hide it. Your job is not to ask. Your job is to watch. The body will tell you what the mouth never will. And the cost of not reading the body is that you will spend your entire life responding to people's words instead of their reality. You will argue with the surface and never touch the substance. You will be confused by behavior that is perfectly predictable if you know what to look for. Number 3. Your composure is a mirror, and most people cannot stand what it shows them. This is where fearlessness becomes a weapon without you ever lifting a finger. When you walk into a room without fear, genuine, embodied, unshakable composure, something happens to everyone else in that room. They become uncomfortable. Not because you have done anything. Not because you have said anything. but because your lack of fear reflects back to them their own fear. They look at you and they see what they are not. They see steadiness where they feel turbulence. They see calm where they feel chaos. They see someone who is not performing confidence but actually possesses it. And that mirror is unbearable for most people. They will do anything to look away from it. They will try to provoke you, because your composure threatens them. If they can make you react, make you emotional, make you lose your cool, then they have proven that your composure was a performance. That you are just as afraid as they are. That the mirror was lying. And they need the mirror to be lying, because the alternative, that someone can walk through the world without the fear that dominates their every waking moment, is too painful to accept. This is why fearless people are both admired and resented. The admiration is real but shallow. The resentment is real and deep. People will be drawn to your composure and simultaneously want to destroy it, because your composure makes their fear undeniable. They cannot hide from it when you are standing there, unbothered, unmoved, unshakable. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote about maintaining inner stillness regardless of external chaos. The Stoic discipline is not about suppressing emotion. It is about achieving a state of inner resolution that external events cannot disturb. And when you carry that into a room full of people who are secretly terrified, you become the most dangerous person present. Not because you will hurt anyone, but because you cannot be manipulated. And people who cannot be manipulated are terrifying to those whose entire social strategy depends on manipulation. The cost of not developing this composure is that you remain part of the pattern. You remain reactive. You remain readable. You remain controllable. You walk into rooms and absorb the fear of everyone in them. You become a mirror of their anxiety instead of a mirror of their fear. There is a difference. Absorbing their anxiety makes you anxious. Reflecting their fear makes you powerful. Number 4. What they tell themselves is not what they are afraid of, the illusion layer is the trap. Here is where most people fail even when they try to read fear. They identify the stated fear and they stop there. Someone says they are afraid of failure, and you take that at face value. Someone says they are afraid of being alone, and you file that away. But the stated fear is almost never the real fear. It is a cover story. It is what they tell themselves so they do not have to look at what is underneath. The person who says they are afraid of failure is usually afraid of something deeper. They are afraid that if they fail, they will be revealed as fundamentally inadequate. They are afraid that failure will confirm a suspicion they have carried since childhood, that they are not enough. That they never were. That all their achievements were compensations for a core deficiency they can feel but cannot name. Failure is the trigger. Inadequacy is the fear. The person who says they are afraid of being alone is usually afraid that if they are alone, they will have to sit with themselves. And they cannot bear to sit with themselves because they do not like who they are when no one is watching. Being alone is the trigger. Self-confrontation is the fear. The person who says they are afraid of conflict is usually afraid that if they engage in conflict, the other person will see something in them that they have been hiding, a rage, a neediness, a desperation. They are afraid of their own internal terrain being exposed through the friction of confrontation. Conflict is the trigger. Exposure is the fear. Do you see the pattern? The stated fear is always one layer above the real fear. Always. And if you operate on the stated fear, you will miscalibrate every time. You will address the symptom and miss the disease. You will think you understand someone when you have only read the dust jacket, not the book. Strategic people go deeper. They listen to the stated fear and then they ask themselves, what would be so bad about that? If someone is afraid of failure, what would failure actually mean to them? What would it reveal? What would it confirm? Keep asking that question and you will arrive at the real fear every time. The real fear is always about identity. It is always about who the person believes they are, or fears they are, at the most fundamental level. And that fear, the identity level fear, is the one that controls everything. The cost of stopping at the surface is that you will waste your energy addressing fears that do not actually drive behavior. You will try to reassure someone about failure when their real fear is inadequacy. You will try to keep someone company when their real fear is self-confrontation. And none of it will work, because you are solving the wrong problem. Number 5. There is a line between awareness and exploitation, and crossing it will corrode you. This is the principle that separates the master from the monster. And it matters more than you think. Once you can read fear, once you can see what people are running from, what their body reveals, what their illusion layer is hiding, you will face a choice. You can use that knowledge to exploit, or you can use it to position. The distinction is everything. Exploitation means taking someone's fear and weaponizing it against them in a way that serves only you. It means using their fear of abandonment to keep them trapped. It means using their fear of exposure to extract compliance. It means manipulating their terror for your benefit and treating them as an instrument rather than a person. And here is what nobody tells you about exploitation: it works, but it hollows you out. It corrodes the part of you that makes you trustworthy to yourself. You start seeing everyone as a target. You start believing that all relationships are transactional. You lose the capacity for genuine connection, because you have trained yourself to see only leverage in every face. And eventually, you become the thing you are exploiting others to avoid. You become someone you cannot stand to sit with when you are alone. Awareness is different. Awareness means seeing the fear clearly and simply holding that knowledge. Not acting on it. Not weaponizing it. Not rushing to use it. Just knowing. And from that knowing, you calibrate. You adjust your approach. You understand why someone behaves the way they do, and you respond to the reality of who they are instead of the illusion of who they pretend to be. You do not need to manipulate someone whose fear you understand. You simply need to position yourself so that their fear works in your favor naturally. If you know your boss is afraid of looking incompetent, you do not humiliate them. You do not expose them. You simply make sure that your competence is visible in ways that make them look good, so their fear of inadequacy drives them to promote you rather than suppress you. You have not exploited them. You have read the terrain and positioned yourself accordingly. If you know your rival is afraid of being ignored, you do not publicly humiliate them. You simply withdraw your attention, your energy, your engagement. Their fear of irrelevance does the rest. They will overreach. They will make mistakes. They will reveal themselves. And you will not have lifted a finger. This is the Machiavellian discipline at its highest level. It is not cruelty. It is not manipulation in the vulgar sense. It is the art of seeing clearly and positioning precisely. It is reading the board and moving your piece to the square that the game demands. The cost of crossing the line is that you gain short-term power and lose long-term self-respect. The cost of never learning the distinction is that you either exploit recklessly and corrode yourself, or you refuse to learn fear reading at all and remain blind. Neither option serves you. Number 6. Identify the core fear driving each person in your orbit and calibrate so precisely that their fear works for you. Now we get practical. Because understanding the theory is useless if you cannot apply it. Here is how you do it. Start with the people closest to you. Not strangers. Not acquaintances. The people who matter, your partner, your business associates, your family members, your closest friends. These are the people whose behavior most directly affects your life, and these are the people whose fears you most need to understand. For each person, ask yourself a series of questions. What does this person consistently avoid? What topics do they deflect? What situations do they engineer their life to stay away from? The avoidance pattern reveals the fear. If someone avoids confrontation at all costs, their fear is tied to conflict or exposure. If someone avoids solitude, their fear is tied to self-confrontation. If someone avoids risk, their fear is tied to loss of security or status. What does this person consistently overcompensate for? The overcompensation pattern is the mirror image of the avoidance pattern. Someone who is constantly performing competence is afraid of being seen as incompetent. Someone who is constantly asserting dominance is afraid of being dominated. Someone who is constantly seeking validation is afraid of being worthless without it. The thing they perform loudest is the thing they fear most. What triggers disproportionate reactions? When does this person respond with intensity that does not match the situation? Those triggers mark the boundary of their fear. Cross that boundary in conversation and you will see the freeze, the flight, or the fight. Each one tells you what you are dealing with. Once you have identified the core fear, the identity-level fear, not the surface fear, you calibrate. Calibration does not mean manipulation. It means adjusting your behavior so that you are not accidentally triggering their fear in ways that harm you. If your partner's core fear is abandonment, and you have a pattern of withdrawing when you are stressed, you are triggering their deepest fear every time you go quiet. They will react badly. You will think they are being unreasonable. They are being predictable. If you understand this, you can change your approach. You can communicate your need for space in a way that does not activate their abandonment fear. You can say what you need without triggering what they fear. That is calibration. If your colleague's core fear is irrelevance, and you have been inadvertently making them feel sidelined, you can adjust. You can include them in ways that cost you nothing but save them from their fear. And in doing so, you convert a potential adversary into an ally. Their fear of irrelevance now drives them to support you, because you are the person who makes them feel relevant. That is calibration. If your rival's core fear is exposure, the fear of being seen as weak or fraudulent, your composure alone is enough. You do not need to attack them. You do not need to expose them. Your steadiness will do the work. They will feel exposed simply by contrast. And they will overreact. They will make the mistake that exposure-afraid people always make. They will try too hard to appear in control, and in doing so, they will reveal exactly how out of control they feel. You just watch. You wait. You position. And their fear engineers their downfall without you touching them. The cost of not calibrating is that you will trigger people's fears accidentally and constantly. You will create enemies without meaning to. You will damage relationships without understanding why. You will be confused by reactions that are perfectly predictable to someone who has done the work you are now doing. Number 7. The person who fears nothing reads everyone, and the person who reads everyone fears nothing. This is the synthesis. This is where it all converges. The reason you have been unable to read other people's fear is that your own fear has been too loud. You cannot hear the signal because your own noise is too strong. Your fear of rejection makes you focus on whether people like you instead of what they are afraid of. Your fear of conflict makes you focus on keeping the peace instead of reading the terrain. Your fear of failure makes you focus on performing competence instead of observing the room. Every fear you carry is a lens that distorts what you see. And the distortion always points the same direction, inward. You are so consumed by your own fear that you cannot see anyone else clearly. This is why fearlessness is not just a personal virtue. It is a strategic necessity. When you eliminate your own fear, not suppress it, not manage it, eliminate it through radical acceptance of worst-case scenarios, you gain the ability to see other people with devastating clarity. The noise goes quiet. The lens clears. And suddenly, every person in your orbit becomes readable. Their body language becomes obvious. Their avoidance patterns become transparent. Their overcompensation becomes almost laughably predictable. And their fear, the thing that controls every choice they make, becomes visible to you like text on a page. This is what Machiavelli was really teaching. Not cruelty. Not scheming. Clarity. The ruthless art Machiavelli perfected was the art of seeing the world as it actually is, without the distortion of your own fear, without the comfort of illusions, without the sedative of wishful thinking. And from that clarity, effective action becomes almost effortless. You do not need to scheme when you can see. You do not need to force when you can calibrate. You do not need to fight when you can position. The fearlessness comes first. The reading comes second. The power comes third. And they are connected in a way that most people never understand. They think fearlessness is about bravery, about charging into danger, about taking risks, about being bold. It is not. Fearlessness is about clarity. It is about removing the distortion that your own fear creates so that you can see the world, and every person in it, exactly as they are. And when you see people as they are, not as they present themselves to be, you gain an advantage that no amount of cleverness or charm or aggression can match. You see the fear. And the fear is the key to everything. The person who fears nothing reads everyone. And the person who reads everyone fears nothing. These two abilities are not separate. They are the same ability expressed in different directions. Eliminate your fear and you see theirs. See their fear and your own loses its grip. They reinforce each other. They build on each other. They create a feedback loop that transforms you from someone who is acted upon into someone who acts. From someone who reacts to someone who reads. From someone who is managed by others' fears into someone who manages the entire field. The cost of remaining afraid is that you will spend your entire life as a character in other people's dramas, reacting to their fears, managed by their anxieties, controlled by the patterns you cannot see because your own noise is too loud. You will be a piece on the board, moved by forces you do not understand. And you will wonder why your life feels like it is happening to you instead of being directed by you. It is happening to you because you cannot see the board. You cannot see the board because your fear is in the way. Remove the fear and the board becomes visible. And when the board is visible, you stop being a piece and start being the player. So let me bring this back to where we started. Everyone you have ever dealt with is running from something. You have been so busy managing your own fear that you never learned what theirs is. And that blindness has cost you relationships, opportunities, positions, and power that you did not even know you were losing. Read their fear and you own their choices. That is not a metaphor. That is mechanics. When you know what someone is afraid of, you know what they will do, what they will avoid, what they will overcompensate for, what they will accept, and what they will reject. You do not need to control them. You need to understand them. And understanding is the highest form of control, because it is invisible. The person who is being understood does not feel controlled. They feel seen. And being seen is so rare, so disarming, so powerful, that people will hand you their trust the moment they believe you truly see them. That is the paradox at the heart of this. The same knowledge that could be used to exploit becomes, when held with discipline, the foundation of genuine influence. Not manipulation. Not coercion. Influence. The kind that lasts. The kind that builds loyalty. The kind that makes people want to follow you, not because they are afraid of you, but because they feel understood by you. And feeling understood by someone who fears nothing is the most powerful psychological experience available to a human being who is afraid of everything. You become the anchor. The reference point. The person they orbit around. Not because you demanded it, but because your clarity and their fear created a gravitational field that they cannot escape. This is the game. This has always been the game. Most people do not even know there is a game. They are pieces on a board, being moved by fears they cannot name, reacting to forces they cannot see, wondering why their lives feel out of control. You now know there is a game. You now know what the board looks like. You now know what drives every piece on it. What you do with that knowledge is what separates you from everyone else. The ruthless art Machiavelli perfected, seeing clearly, positioning precisely, acting without fear, is now yours. Not as theory. As practice. Starting now. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when the fear subsides. The fear will not subside. You subdue it by acting in spite of it, and it shrinks through repetition. Right now, today, in your very next conversation, stop listening to what people say and start watching what they do. Watch the freeze. Watch the flight. Watch the fight. Watch the deflection, the overcompensation, the disproportionate reaction. And underneath all of it, find the fear. It is always there. It is always running the show. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That is the point of no return. You will never interact with people the same way again. You will never be confused by behavior that used to baffle you. You will never be blindsided by reactions that used to come out of nowhere. Because nothing comes out of nowhere. Everything comes from fear. And fear, once seen, is not your master. It is your map. Read their fear and you own their choices. That is the thesis. That is the practice. That is the art. And it is yours. If you have understood what I have laid out here, if you have internalized even a fraction of it, then you already know what to do. You do not need more information. You need more observation. You need more composure. You need more stillness in the face of a world that is perpetually terrified. Go do the work. Watch the room. Read the fear. And if you are ready to walk through the world as someone who cannot be read, cannot be rattled, and cannot be managed, drop the words "I am untouchable" in the comments below. Not as a performance. As a declaration. Say it because you mean it. Say it because you are ready to become it. The transformation does not begin when you feel ready. It begins the moment you decide that you are done being afraid and done being blind. That moment is now.